In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Now I want to go to page 43 to talk about relevance theory. But actually, the book begins the discussion back earlier to page 42 with the last paragraph on page 42. So, mistakenly, the writer puts the topic on the next page, which is page 43 with relevance theory, but actually everything begins here, like page 42. So back to page 42, we are going to begin the conversation, the relevance theory. In fact, something is necessary for you to know that the previous discussion with the cooperative principle resulted in 4 maxims. One maxim was the most important maxim according to the relevance theory, and this is in fact the maxim of relation. The whole theory of relevance theory wants to say that everything related to, in fact, conversation is something like one maxim, which is the most important maxim. So I want to begin the discussion of the relevance theory on page 42. 5 lines to the bottom of the page 42, and the new paragraph there talks about Sperber and Wilson 1995 say that all maxims can be reduced to the maxim of relation. It means that all maxims must be changed and must be viewed as one single maxim. Must be changed into one maxim and viewed as one maxim. And this maxim is the maxim of relevance, maxim of relation. You remember it? Maxim of relation. Line 2 says, since the relevance is the natural feature of all exchanges in which speakers have the aim of achieving successful communication. We want to have successful communication. I want to be relevant. You want to be relevant. So we have one single maxim of relevance, which is important, which is at work here. The maximum quantity can be expressed as, so do we have a maximum quantity? According to relevance theory, we have to rephrase it, re-express it, rewrite it as giving the right amount of, the maximum quantity can be expressed as giving the right amount of relevant information. So it is changed to maximum relation. The maximum quantity can be stated as give sincere relevant information. And the maximum manner could be rephrased or can be rewritten as give unambiguous relevant information. Okay, so these 3 maxims reduce in one single maxim. Page 43, line 1 says, we assume that everything we read and hear contains utterances that make sense and that they are all relevant to each other and form a coherent whole. So, reducing or changing all maxims to one single maxim of relevance, relation. Sperber and Wilson say that the principle of relevance apply without an exception. Without exceptions. Without an exception or without exceptions. So, it is not a question of communicators following, violating, or flouting. There is only one maxim. Now, actually, the topic is there, but we are going to just continue because the relevance theory appears on page 42, as I told you. Well, Sperber and Wilson, line 1, propose, they continue like something like this. Relevance theory and say that conversational implicature is understood by hearers simply by selecting the relevant features of the context and recognizing whatever speakers say as relevant to the conversation. Again, you see, reducing everything to one single maxim. When hearers, like threes, and readers make sense of a text, they interpret the connections between the utterances as meaningful, making inferences by drawing on their background knowledge or of the world, drawing of their understanding of the world, they mean. Background knowledge of the world. Background knowledge of the world. Now, they say that. Line 1, 2, 3. 2 lines to the bottom of the paragraph. They say that the purpose of communication is not to duplicate thoughts, to repeat, to make two things which are the same, is not to duplicate thoughts, but to enlarge mutual cognitive environments. Okay? So, this is what we want to understand from the relevance theory. So if they actually say something like this, what is the relevance theory? Maybe it's a question that you're supposed to have in an interview with you about the topic of relevance theory in linguistics. Anyway, for Iranians, it's the case that there is an entrance exam for their PhD courses. They have to have an entrance exam, and the entrance exam is so difficult. So not all Iranians can be a PhD candidate. But for Iraqis, as foreigners, we are going to admit foreigners in our universities without it. So I only want to say that for the foreigners, there is no something like these kinds of entrance examinations, but for Iranians it is like this, that they need entrance examinations in order to go to the PhD dissertations and PhD courses, okay, PhD degree, to achieve a PhD degree. So maybe this is the question that they ask Iranians, but not Iraqis, when they go to, in fact, their entrance exams. Anyway, from this part on, the book attempts to, in fact, qualify and explain the relevance theory. So, the next paragraph talks about two things related to the relevance theory. So, I just begin it like this. The new paragraph. The degree of relevance is governed by two things. One is contextual effects, and number two, processing effort. So, number one, contextual effects. Number two, processing effort. Contextual effects include such things as adding new information, strengthening or contradicting an existing assumption among, in fact, those who are communicating with each other, or weakening old information. Okay? So it's like this. Now the book says, the more contextual effect, the greater the relevance of the particular fact. So it is more relevant. It is more relevant when we see there are, in fact, more contextual effect. A new fact unconnected to anything already known is not worth processing in the conversation. So it is irrelevant. Whereas a new fact taken with something already known is worth processing. Why? Because it is relevant. So we take the relevant parts and throw out the irrelevant parts. Now let us go to the second one. As far as the processing effort is concerned, the second type, as we talked about just now, the processing effort. As far as the processing effort is concerned, the theory says that the less effort it takes to recover a fact, the greater the relevance. So it's easy for you to understand. Why? Because it is more relevant. If there's something that is easily understood by in fact, communicator by an elocutor, it is considered to be more relevant. As easy as that. Now, you have to, in fact, read the whole thing in this paragraph for yourself, but let us go to the last line of this paragraph, beginning with as far as. The 3 lines to the bottom, this says, the hearer interprets what is said by finding an accessible context that produces what? That produces the maximum amount of new information with the minimum amount of processing. Doesn't need to think about it for the listener. Okay? It doesn't mean to, in fact, it's so difficult. So, with the minimum amount of processing effort by the listener. So there's a kind of example, because I don't want to continue with these, with the relevance theory like this. I, in fact, keep it for you to go and read it by yourself, and there's a good example out there, and below it there's a kind of explanations on page 43 and 44. Finally, we go to the limitations. I don't want to actually continue with these types of things. Like any type of things, this relevance theory actually has got its own limitations. Okay? Here, the writers actually want to say that there is, again, limitations to relevance theory, as we already had with our previous examples of theories, principles, etc., maxims, etc. So the book says something like this. Relevance Theory, line 1, page 44. Relevance Theory, too, has its own limitations. However, as May 1994 says, the fact that the Sperber and Wilson feel that their principle accounts for all crisis maxims and that it is without exception and refutable means that the notion of relevance is so encompassing that it loses its explanatory force. Because it says, well, everything is like this, everything is like this, everything is like this. Around the world, everything is like this, relevance theory. You see? Well, science must not be like this, that they say. Well, we reduce everything to one single principle that covers all instances. It's too powerful and does not say everything. Does not say everything simply because it's too powerful. So the limitation of the relevance theory is that it reduces everything to one single relevance maxim. So it is so powerful because it's so powerful. It's too powerful, not so powerful. It is too powerful because it encompasses all types of things that is there in the conversation. We say, what type of conversation was that? We say it was relevant because it is relevant. It was relevant. The conversation was relevant. There's another conversation. Again, we say it was relevant. Another one, there's that yes, last night. Again, we say it's relevant. So it doesn't say anything. So this is one thing. In fact, line 5, I suppose, yes. 1, 2, 3, 4. In fact, it could be said that everything implies something that is not said. I don't want to continue with that like this, but you have to read it line by line by yourself. Going to the next paragraph, we talk about another limitation of the relevance theory. Because it says that nothing about interaction and because it doesn't say anything about interaction and does not include cultural or social dimensions such as gender, age, status, and the nationality of the people in the conversation. It only says relevant. Okay? Anyway, we don't want to, in fact, go further with this politeness, with this, in fact, theory of relevance or relevance theory. If you want to continue, you have to go to parts B, C, and D of the book, which is a continuation of the materials that we have here. We only want, as language teachers, we want to understand these relevant ideas which are important for us to continue the task of our teaching. So we just simply stop, and if you want to continue, you have to go to other areas to understand this area, and in order to understand what we mean by relevance theory. But back to the earlier version of this theory, which was cooperative principles, the cooperative principle and the maxims of the conversation, there are good amounts of, let's say, theses by the students of, in fact, PhD students or MA students of English as a second language, written for the purpose of communications by, in fact, non-native speakers learning English. So we come to say that at this time that a good amount of materials, articles, books, etc. deal with the Grecian maxims and their importance in language teaching. But actually, the relevance theory has got its own way, which maybe is of less importance to the language teacher. So I stop here on page 44, and the next discussion is something called the politeness. Again, there's another theory like politeness, like the ones that we had earlier, and this one again appears to be something again related to the field of language and language teachers. Okay, thank you very much, and we stop just here. Thank you very much for this presentation, listening to this presentation. Thank you very much.